Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CBI's SME webinar. Today, focused on business resilience, but very much putting a lens of ESG on that. And today's session is delivered in partnership with our good friends at Marsh Commercial. And from Marsh Commercial, we've got David Logan here supporting us. Now, the format of the session is as normal. We'll hear from our three speakers in turn, and then we will open things up to Q&A. So please do go into the chat box and send in any questions you have, and we will do our best to put those to the panelists. Any questions we can't answer or we run out of time for, we will come back to you on a one-to-one basis with some information on that. Now, in terms of our speakers, we've got three fantastic speakers. We've got David Logan, who is risk manager at Marsh Commercial, and David will be helping us to explore resilience in terms of running a business, considering costs associated with risk and business continuity. After David, we'll be hearing from Jen Betworth. Jen is head of employment at the CBI, and she'll be very much putting the sort of looking at business resilience through the S lens of ESG and thinking about it from an employer perspective. So, you know, how we treat teams, hybrid working culture, the role of leader in productivity, health and well-being. And finally, we're delighted to welcome Sarah Robbins, who's Sustainability Manager at Banner Uniforms, great Southwest medium-sized company in the part of the world that I live in. And Sarah will be helping us explore the E within business resilience and ESG, really how it can support business operations, workplace performance, and what Banner themselves have done in the last 18 months. So hopefully some really good peer-to-peer learning in that session. Now, look, I'll pop myself onto mute because I know you're keen to hear from our various speakers. And David, I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. So basically, to start, the way I want to start this is think about what is business resilience. So the simple answer to that is preparedness. We need to be prepared for whatever is going to come, being able to manage any sort of crisis, and in the end, basically ensure that our business continuity come out the other end the same as what we went in. Now, if you really think about that, that represents the ability for us as an organisation to rapidly adapt and respond to all types of risks. Now, when we think about risks, normally my job, we're looking at things as natural disasters, cyber attacks, supply chain disruptions, and of course, that is one that is key at the moment. We're all suffering from supply chain disruptions. But of course, the biggest one that we've gone through at the moment is COVID. And that has been one that has hit every one of us. The key terms basically out of this that I'd like you to take are, we need to manage when whatever crisis strikes, and we need to then think about continuity afterwards. We need to think about how we're going to get out the other end. Mainly, it's back to it again, be prepared. So we need to learn from this crisis that we're going through at the moment, and I think we've all got the ability to learn from that. I say that we're going through, we are still going through it, and this crisis has not ended. We need to make sure that we manage our businesses in a resilient way, that we will survive now. And so many businesses have not survived. You guys need to think about what you're doing from this crisis and from whatever the next crisis is. COVID is not going to be the last thing that hits us as a global pandemic. We've been talking about global pandemics for 15, 20, 25 years. We had SARS in the 2000s. But really, this has hit harder than anything else. You're all aware of that. But ask yourselves, and this goes into what we're going to be talking about a little bit later, but ask yourselves, what are your key assets in your business? If you didn't really know before, you do now. It's your staff. It's your workforce. It's your employees. Without them, how do you run your business? How do you actually, compete? You can't. We haven't been able to do it. We haven't been able to trade because of lockdown. We haven't had our staff have been off, infected, or having to self-isolate. And we need to think about how we bring them back, but we need to think about bringing them back that they're safe. And of course, if you work in an office, That's not going to be as simple as just opening the office up and bringing everybody back in. Some people will want to come back. Some people might not want to come back. They've enjoyed being at home. The main thing that they've probably enjoyed is not having to do a 2-hour commute in the morning and a 2-hour commute at night. And plus the fact that they've actually saved a lot of money in doing that. But they've actually found they've been more productive. A lot of people have found that working at home has been more productive. And then there's going to be some people that want to be both. In other words, the hybrid role, which is what I am now. My company have put me into a hybrid role. So resilience is planning for all of these and accommodating your staff and making sure that we can look after those staff. We need to think that when we bring them in as well about cleaning regimes, especially if we're looking just at COVID. And you need to think about hybrid staff coming in. We can't just have it maybe that every one of our hybrid staff decides that they want to come in. So we need to think IT, we need to think about how they can come in. We in Marsh have put a system in place that we actually have to go into a app on our phone and actually ask to come in the office. And then, and only then, if there is sufficient space, we'll be allocated a desk. When we finish, we leave the desk, we log out, and that desk is then sanctioned to be cleaned before another person comes in. That's resilience, that's planning, that's taking measures into place to do it. But we also still need to think that if we are doing that and we're all working in different locations, some at home, some doing the hybrid, some in the office, we need to still interact with our teams. And good leadership means we still need to keep those teams together. So running things like yoga sessions on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock, where everybody, you can see that I am quite active in yoga and that sort of thing. I actually go for the Friday 11s, which is a coffee and a bun or that in a 10-minute chat where all the team get together and have a chat. Those are the sort of things, new ways, and that's what you need to be thinking about. That is your business and that is your resilience moving forward. It's about thinking about new ways to do these sort of things. We need to put those in to protect our workforce. We need to think about the health, the well-being, and that they're in a good place, no matter where they are as part of our team, are happy. And therefore, they, in the role they have chosen, they still feel part of the team, but they are happy in what they're doing. And that's the problem, because we'll lose people, and we'll lose people for whatever reasons. And losing a person, it's very hard to replace a good member of staff. If I put an analogy against it, if a player in a football team leaves, it's very difficult to replace that player. And as a matter of fact, it usually costs you a lot more money to put another player in. And then it takes time for them to get to know the game and working with that team. And therefore, they don't produce well until they get that. And that takes time. I think Oxford Economics actually ran a survey and did analysis on this, and it worked out that for an organisation, if a person was earning about 25,000, I think it was, a year or more, it would cost about 30,000 for the replacement of that person. Now, if you lose 3 employees, that's £90,000. And that's not counting the wages that you're paying, etc., and so on. We in Marsh have developed an employee turnover process report that we would look at that. We input all the bits and pieces in, and I believe that's a link to that is going to be in there. So there are people out there that can help you. You need to know about those stats, but we need to take proactive steps to create a more open, supportive culture with our staff. We need to feel confident in talking about their mental health. And to do that, we need to make sure that management are well aware about how to look for. I know Jennifer will probably talk about those sort of things, but my bit to take out of this, my key bit that I think that you need to be taking out of this is think about what we were before. And think, we had business interruption, we had business continuity plans. Have they worked? Have they actually got us out the other end of this? Well, partly out the other end of this. We couldn't have foreseen this pandemic. Well, we could. But it did happen, and we have to change. So I think you need to learn lessons, and the key lessons that we need to learn out of this is review and update our business interruption, our BCP plans. We need to manage the potential risks that you've actually got, the controls, the procedures that we have, and we should be ready to deal with any of those future threats. You need to manage your key assets by offering them, and remember what I said, your key asset is your employees. We need to manage that by offering them assistance and help them promote that open, inclusive culture. But then you also need to think about mitigating any risk. And that is where you have to think about vetting your current insurance. Everybody knows now that business interruption insurance didn't quite cover what a lot of people thought business interruption insurance covered. And that's maybe because that you never set your business insurance up the right way, your business interruption insurance up the right way. So maybe reviewing that. If I had one last thing that I need to maybe say to you, I said at the start, your key asset is your staff, and you need to look after them through creating the good, mentally healthy, open, inclusive structure. Don't forget, there is one other main key asset in your companies. You. Don't forget to take care of yourself. We're all under pressure now, and owners and directors and senior managers in company are more under pressure than ever before. Think about yourselves. Deborah, I will give back to you.
Thank you, David. Some very, very sage advice. And I think that reviewing that business interruption, that updating it, making sure it's that regular drumbeat of review. Sometimes those things are easy to slip, especially when you're in a busy SME. And I think that's really good advice. Just to the team in the background, I'm afraid I'm not getting the questions coming up in my box, and I think you have to turn me off to turn me back on to do that. Instead, Megan, can you send me any questions that come through Teams, please, and I'll pick them up that way. Sorry, everyone, just a bit of technical glitches. As I said to our speakers, something always goes wrong. So we're good at rolling with the punches on the SME webinar. Right, Jen, really good to see you. I haven't seen you in a little while, but hopefully we'll be seeing more of you soon. But really keen to hear from you, especially thinking about business resilience, but putting perhaps that S lens within the ESG context onto it.
Thank you, Deborah. Well, look, as David said, people are businesses' greatest asset, and that's the bit that I want to focus on today. That has always been the case. So I thought that before going into the what can businesses do, and what particularly I think is applicable for SMEs, is why now? Why now is business resilience, and particularly the workforce resilience, such an important consideration to mitigate risk for your business? I think the first thing to say is we are in a really tight labour market at the moment. I think many people on the call will be facing challenges with labour shortages as part of the wider supply chain disruption that the UK economy is seeing as we reopen from the pandemic. It means that retention has never been more important. As David said, there is a huge cost to losing staff, and mitigating that risk is a massive one right now. And I think there are two other things as well contextually. One is the acceleration we've seen in the last 18 months on flexible working has been incredible. It has really changed the way we work. I think we now know there are pros and there are cons to that new way of working, but particularly it means that having a sustainable hybrid working policy where more people are working remotely that works for both the business and the individual is going to be crucial, not least because it's the new way of working, but also COVID cases are rising over the winter. Public health experts are saying there could be risk of winter flu outbreaks. There is an expectation that individual companies might need to ask more people to work from home as a mitigation measure, or you might have more absences in your workforce as a result because of the public health situation. And then the final thing is just it is well reported that increases of mental health issues have massively gone up as a result of the stresses and strains of the pandemic. And when people are not feeling at their best, they do not work at their best. And that has a huge impact for engagement and productivity. So they're sort of the three things that I think are going on in the background. So what can you do about it? I'm going to bucket up those things into two areas. One is the biggie, it's retention. What can you do to retain staff? But then if you're keeping your staff, what can you do to keep them as engaged and as motivated and therefore as productive as possible? So I think it's two aspects. First, on retention. Look, there has been huge wage pressures across the economy, and I'm not going to pretend that money isn't one of the main drivers for retaining staff. But when lots of businesses that we speak to every day, and particularly when I'm speaking to SMEs, the cash flow situation is still very tight as firms are coming through recovery. It means I wanted to focus on what are the non-wage aspects of how to retain staff. And I'd pick out four things. One is one of the key things people consistently say they stay for in their roles are having an employer that values their work and that recognizes their contribution. Second is having an employer that wants to support their development or their training and has opportunities for that. And third, that has cares about the day-to-day working conditions of staff. And some very basic things that have come through in our conversations are things like, what are the facilities like for your staff? Are the toilets clean? Do you have a canteen where people can get a hot drink if they have been out on the road all day? You know, things that just make people's day-to-day experience of work are just important as their pay from a perspective of feeling that there is an employer that cares about them and invests in them and feels that they are a valued member of their staff. Similarly, the number one driver of employee engagement is your line manager. Is your line manager, your site manager, your team leader, whatever your business calls it, is that individual able to articulate why that person is doing a valuable job, you know, what the contribution of that individual is, call out where they have done a good job, where there is some recognition and there is some appreciation. It is a very cheap way to keep staff feeling that they're contributing and wanting to stay with your business. If I move on to the just sort of broadening that out and thinking about engagement and productivity more generally, I've mentioned the line management or the team management aspect of it. I think this relates really closely to hybrid working. So as David said, there will, you know, the future of work is flexible working, and I think the businesses of all sizes and of all sectors will at least have some staff that are working, more staff that are working remotely. And you know, as I said at the beginning, if there is any change to the public health situation, that will be accelerated as well. When it comes to business resilience on hybrid working, I mentioned at the beginning, needing to have a sustainable hybrid working model, and that means something that'll work for both businesses and the individual. I think there are three key questions that businesses that are going through this transition at the moment successfully are asking themselves. One is being really clear on, you know, what does my business need? Where you have contracts or you have customer delivery or you have service hours, you need to be really clear on what the expectations are of your staff in order to be able to fulfill that first and foremost. Second, that relates to that is, can you use those business reasons to be really clear about the reasons that you want people to come into the office? So, you know, people's when businesses are talking to staff about bringing, you know, coming back to the office, being crystal clear on the value of coming back to a shared workspace and the change of activities that you're wanting people to do when they come back. So particularly focused on any tasks that are around collaboration, any task around innovation and brainstorming strategy, staff where you're doing networking or sort of face-to-face engagement with customers and clients is so much better for business. When people understand the reason why the business needs it, they are far more engaged and willing to participate in that hybrid working way. And then the final thing is actually something that David said, which is, what is your culture? What is your feeling of belonging? And what is your engagement with staff when they are not in a shared workspace with you? And do you have the technology in place? Are you speaking to leaders about how they need to adapt their communication style to manage that? And then the final area I'll just touch on when it comes to getting maximum engagement and maximum productivity from staff is on health and wellbeing. I think, you know, we know that it's the number one, health and wellbeing is the number one D&I priority for larger businesses over the next 5 years that they've told us. And it is slightly less for SMEs. But I want to give you two stats that I think show an ROI for why you should consider health and wellbeing as a key part of workforce resilience. The first is businesses that invest in the mental health of their staff have found that employees are 12% more productive. And the second is that for every £1 invested on workplace mental health interventions, there's been found to be a £5 return. So I think there's a pretty clear case that there is a real benefit, not just for staff, but for your operations. We might come into a little bit more detail later on in this discussion about practical things that can be done. But I want to maybe pick up what David said about resilience. Resilience also being looking after you as a leader, because when it comes to health and well-being, actually the number one thing that is so critical is championing the importance of health and well-being from the top. And that could be as simple as you saying to your staff, I know the pressures we're under, and I want you to feel that we are a workplace where if you are feeling stressed or you're feeling like you are going through a mental health issue, we know that acting early and signposting you to support early is so much better for you as an individual and for me as a business, and we have the tools to do that. And just opening up the ability for people to come forward is already a massive step forward in the resilience of your staff with regard to health and wellbeing. So I'll leave it there. Pass back to you, Deborah, and I think we can pick up some of those bits in discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that just that difference between hybrid and flexible working will be just useful to perhaps unpick a bit later. And David, just in terms of the chat, I think a couple of questions we've got around supply chain and considerations and how mitigate, because obviously supply chain, I've got one who's saying, you know, the demand is going up in their main supplier, which means the demand is feeding through to them, and you know, they're anxious about how they meet that demand and how to manage that relationship. Right, Sarah, over to you. Really excited to hear, very, very practical about what's been happening in Banner, especially on that environmental piece.
Okay, so obviously at Banner, you know, we've made a commitment to continuously improve both the social and environmental impacts of our business and responsible practice. We've recognised our responsibility as the UK's leading supplier of schoolwear, that we need to respond to the global environmental issues and biodiversity loss and do whatever we can to reduce the environmental footprint and also help to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. We also recognise doing the right thing for the planet to minimise our impact on the environment, the natural world and the communities we serve, and also for the school children who wear our garments, who are passionate advocates of zero emission circular economy, would also give us a competitive advantage. So what was our approach to this? Well, whilst we always hold our suppliers to account with regards to ethical trading, we were in some ways behind our competitors on other elements of sustainability. So at the start of 2019, we set out to devise and deliver the biggest, most holistic sustainability strategy in our sector, focusing on 6 key pillars, sustainability pillars, which comprise customer, supply chain, product, environment, people and community, and obviously meeting the needs of planet and people. So we wrap all this up in our social environmental responsibility strategy, which we call SER. In some ways it's the same as CSR, but we wanted to emphasise the environmental aspect due to the nature of our business, and we don't want to be too corporate. So as far as our business, sustainability is really a key strategic priority and is at the heart of everything we do, and also aligns with our values framework too. So making the right calls, one of our company values, is an intrinsic part of our sustainability strategy and is really helping us to embed sustainability into the culture of our business. It's very important that we have an internal team, so people obviously are really important to the whole delivery of our strategy. So myself as full-time sustainability manager, we have a governance team. Someone from exec level is accountable for each of the sustainability pillars. We also have a product development team focusing the majority of their time in this area, and a cross-functional team of 15 willing volunteers, which we call our SIR stars. So they weave the delivery of day-to-day strategy into their roles. They support on-the-ground actions and getting stuff done, really, and we're very proud of their collective efforts. The idea we set up an idea of a green monitor, which is a tool that we record and monitor customer feedback on green issues. That actually came from one of the stars. And in terms of buy-in from the C-suite and decision making, it's been really hugely helpful for our progress with our sustainability strategy, that I report directly into our CFO, Ian Webb, who is himself on both the SIR stars teams and is genuinely passionate about sustainability. And also our head of HR, Leslie, reports into him. And this has really definitely helped sustainability to pervade, through our people plan and internal comms. So let's look at some of the actions that we took to mitigate the environmental impacts. So one of the first actions we took was to complete an internal sustainability audit, which was just a simple impact assessment across key areas of our business in relation to environmental and social impacts. We really needed to know where we were and identify the gaps. The SIR stars team were heavily involved with the audit, and they were engaging with their department teams and colleagues. And the insights that we got from the Green Monitor really helped us to focus on refining our strategy and environmental policy, as well as reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible through our own actions. And here's some of the key actions that we took. We agreed a green energy strategy and an LED lighting programme. Solar PV is something that we're also looking to explore again. Our company vehicle policy moved to hybrid vehicles only, with a few that are fully electric. And we improved our waste management and reporting by appointing a zero to landfill waste management company to manage all the waste streams. We also set stretching environmental targets for our overseas supply chain, requiring them to complete higher level third-party audit process with extended environmental measures. And we're now successfully moving nearly 50% of our products to recycled fabrics, such as recycled polyester, which is made from plastic bottles, that we're preventing from going to landfill as well. We use 100% recycled paper in our offices and FSC certified paper for our marketing materials. An area that's a big focus for us is plastic packaging action and textile recycling. We're committed to removing single-use plastic from our supply chain and transition to sustainable packaging. We also want to be able to recycle repurposed textiles and put surplus garments back into our supply chain. Both these areas are not without their challenges due to the complex nature of our business and also the durability elements of the garments, but we're determined to find solutions through collaboration with some academic research institutions. And finally, we committed to becoming a carbon neutral organisation by 2021 for our group UK operations, and we successfully achieved this in March this year. So we engaged an experienced carbon specialist consultant and focused on measuring our scope 2+ emissions and developed a plan to offset those emissions that we were not able to eliminate. The most challenging part here was collating all the data. So my advice is to take regular meter readings for electricity, heating and water, record your business mileage and other impacts such as waste and recycling. We chose offsetting projects that were UN or Gold Standard accredited and fully traceable. The projects we support in countries where we were seeking to mitigate against any negative impacts of our business operation. So we took a 50-50 blended approach with some projects overseas, some projects in the UK, and we actually planted a woodland in the Hereford Wales border, which obviously provides a space where wildlife and nature can thrive. So that's a kind of lasting legacy for us to look back on. One other thing that we did was we also joined the United Nations Climate Neutral Now initiative to validate what we're doing and to support the global effort to net zero by 2030. And this involved us sending a report and our carbon reduction plan, and we also had to sign a pledge to commit to the initiative. We only started our journey 2 years ago and published our first sustainability report this year. And we know we've got loads more to do to improve our overall sustainability performance. But I can't stress enough how important it is to embed ESG factors within your business, obviously from a business resilience point of view, and what a positive impact it can have, not only on your overall business performance and culture of your business, but on your people now and obviously the people that you employ in the future.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you say that you're just at the start of the journey, but I think lots of people will be very impressed with what you're doing. It's very, I think that's really interesting about Banner as well, is that it's been absolutely supported at the executive team and the board,
Yes.
and the commitment, and there's been, resource allocation. I suppose just going back to maybe that point on Jen made around, actually it makes good business sense to invest, and especially when times are hard and we know people are cash scrapped, and that in particular in our SME community. But can you just talk us about but a little bit around implementing your ESG policies and positive impact it's had or not in terms of the culture at Banner, and future employees thinking and interested in applying for work at the company?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, our head of PR head of HR, she's actually had feedback when recruiting. She's had many candidates refer to our sustainability report as being the key reason that they want to actually work for us. And more candidates are asking about our ESG policy during interview, and many have sought out our report prior to interview and commenting on how it gives them a real sense of who we are as a business and what we stand for. And secondly, we know that from our internal engagement surveys, and this year we actually added a question regarding SER, social environmental responsibility. So we included that in the survey for the first time this year, and we had 70% of employees. So one of the questions was, how do you feel about our company's sustainability efforts, or how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel good? And actually 70% of colleagues felt that the company's our sustainability efforts made them feel good about working for Banner. So yes, I would say that it's having an impact on the culture of our business. Obviously we've only started to sort of track it in an anecdotal way, but obviously going forward, it's definitely something that really is,
Thank you, Sarah. And it's interesting. It goes again back to David's point around employees being your biggest asset, and if you're cutting through the ability to retain and and recruit, that's fantastic. Also, I think it's really important, because I caught up with our head of financial services at the start of the week, and I think something really important for SMEs is Chris, who's our head of financial services, I know many of you know. Larger firms are going to be asked in terms of their reporting on carbon reporting, and they're not just being asked about it in terms of themselves, they're going to be asked it in terms of their supply chain as well. So I know, Sarah, you're doing it and pushing it into your supply chain, but I think it's important, if you are an SME with especially with a listed company. If you are thinking, actually you need to be thinking about how you do your carbon reporting. If you're wanting to think about, David, and that risk, that potential risk that you might, it might be more at risk, that contract, if you aren't thinking about your carbon reporting. So it's probably very worthwhile, well, it is worthwhile looking at your supply chain both up and down to think about sustainability. David, if I could come to you perhaps first. I mean, the session is very much on business preparedness, and perhaps you could talk us through why. I mean, you talked about why it's so important, but I suppose COVID was such a curveball. And how do the business even start to predict the unpredictable? The unknown. What advice would you give to businesses is on this call in relation to that?
I think really what you need to do, it is about your business interruption, it is about your contingency planning, but the main way is, again, the continuity. What you need to do is you need to think what your key factors are. What is it that your business needs to continue? So whether that's from your supply coming in and who your suppliers are, making sure that you're not putting the proverbial all your eggs in one basket, that you've actually got the ability. So in other words, if you get steel to come in to actually be part of your manufacturing, you don't just have one organisation that you purchase from. You need to think about having others that they can meet the shortfall. So if one of your suppliers fails because of this and they go bust for all intents and purposes, you can still get the same amount of supply from your other suppliers. And likewise, on the other side of it, going out, don't even think about using one haulage company to deliver your goods or whatever. Make sure that you've got associations with several. It may be that you have a major one, but you have to do that. So it's about sitting down and trying to think, what are the things that can go wrong? Where can things go wrong? Now, the one thing that we didn't think about is pandemic, where we lose staff, because then you can't work, you can't do anything. That is a total curveball. But you need to think about that going forward. And if you want to think about it on that sort of sense, we never ever thought, prior to the year 2000, that anybody would do something terrible like happened on 9/11. Now, when you design buildings and everything, you think about that. So we learn from our lessons, and that's what we need to think. Think of what has happened and think about what you need to plan now for going forward.
Thank you. That's a very good point. And apologies, everyone. I've got a couple of dogs here. I'm dog sitting unexpectedly, so if you can hear the hands of hell, apologies. I've got noise cancelling, so hopefully it isn't impacting on you too much. Right, Sarah, just in terms of sort of those regulatory drivers, because ESG, business resilience, does sit within that context. Can you talk us through the challenges that you face in terms of regulatory drivers and how you've looked to mitigate some of those risks?
Yeah, so in terms of that, we'd already started looking at introducing sustainable packaging, which is quite a challenge. Obviously, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it a lot quicker. So we started actually looking at biodegradable options, and then we were made aware at the beginning of this year of the government sort of policy paper relating to proposed plastic packaging tax, which is proposed to take effect from next April. So we kind of had to change our plans a little bit and move towards recycled content in our packaging. And then there's also other regulatory drivers such as EPR, which is the extended producer responsibility, and reforms in that area are really going to have big financial impact, with additional costs, obviously, having to plan and report in much more detail with your data. So those areas are in the background, and obviously we are still continuing with our journey to push forward to implement sustainable packaging, but obviously we've had to change, and we're looking to find out the final guidelines relating to the government policy, because I think there's still an update to come. So once we have that, then we can set up policy, clear policy on that particular area. So for us, packaging is quite a key challenge. Yeah.
Thank you, and I think that's a really important point, though, isn't it? About keeping an eye on it. It's so often you're so caught up in the business and delivering the business. Actually, keeping an eye on the policy landscape is really hard. And obviously, I would say join the CBI to make sure you keep on top of that. Just to let you know, actually, everyone, we have just done today an article on our website, so it is open to everyone, public, around business rates. So probably relevant to everybody who's on this call. So do, and Megan will get that sent out as well. I'm just conscious of time, and do you know what? We could carry on this subject for ages, couldn't we? It's so interesting, so we might have to think about that. What I would do just for the last couple of minutes is perhaps if each of you could give us your top tip for, what top tip would you give to an SME starting on their business resilience or ESG journey? And what I'll do is start David, Sarah, and then Jen. So David.
I think I would have to go back to business interruption and contingency planning. I think you need to review where you are. And even if you think that you've got good, robust plans for BI and BCP, try testing them. Don't wait until something happens. Run tests. Because if you get a risk manager like myself or someone in, we will test you in the sense of we will throw that curveball at you and find out how you will then deal with that situation. And that will help you then plan for the future.
Great, thank you. Very good. Yes, test before you get tested. Right, Sarah.
Well, I'm going to go back to the people side of things, because obviously people are really important in delivering, a strategy, and also ensuring that you can embed within the business. So I think engaging with your colleagues is really important, and trying to set up a team of people that can really help drive things forward and support driving change that's required. Yeah.
Thank you. And Jen, last but not least.
Well, I'm going to build on Sarah's point, because I think my key takeaway would be your line managers, your team leaders, your site managers, whatever you call that middle management role in your business, is your first line of defense when it comes to workforce resilience. They are the ones that can tell you what morale is like, what engagement is like. They can be spotting signs of poor mental health in staff and signposting to staff. They recognise and they reward your staff, and recognition, reward is such a crucial driver of people feeling valued and wanting to retain. And I think the takeaway, which is maybe the challenge to your line managers, is have they considered how their leadership and their management styles need to change as a result of more people working remotely? How do their comms need to change so that they're speaking to people who are not working on site as much as when they are in the office or on site? How are they engaging staff? And do they feel like they've got the leadership skills to be able to manage teams that might be working at home or working on site? And we've actually got some guidance coming out later this year that might be helpful on that, which we will circulate more details on.
Great, thank you. Oh, well, we've just got a couple of minutes over, so 1 minute over, so apologies for that. But thank you, everyone stayed on. So thank you so much for joining us. Very great thanks to David, Sarah, and Jen, and obviously Marsh for supporting this. Information will be coming through, but take care, everyone, and have a lovely weekend when it gets here.